Well, good afternoon. Kristen Collins here. Incredibly excited to spend a half hour with my amazing, beautiful, vibrant soul sister, Sarah Owen. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Kristen. I'm so excited to be with you. Just to get some time with you is great. So
So
it doesn't
grateful.
even really matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter what we talk about, right? We just get to be together, which is fantastic.
Well, I appreciate you taking out some time to connect. And I know that our relationship is so special because it's not often, like you said, that we get to, but when we do, it's very impactful to my world. So I want to honor that. And what I'm doing right now during this pandemic, I found myself really deep in thought and at a loss for articulating all the crazy that I have to say. And I said, I want to reflect on my journey and what has brought me to today's current chapter and thought process. And I want to do that by touching in for about a half hour with people who have greatly impacted that journey. And you are one of those people that have greatly impacted my journey. So I want to start by honoring your light and your beauty, and thank you for being so impactful in my life.
That is such a great affirmation for me. And I think that more and more now we're taking time with each other to do that. I think this time, like you say, that you've been deep in thought makes us reflect on a lot of things, and that you're taking the extra step to affirm people in that is so meaningful. You know, I've often said to you when you've given me affirmations like that you're just a mirror, that we just mirror each other and what we find in each other. So right back at you.
Well, and thank you for that, because that brings me to the point in time, one of the most impactful, you know where I'm going. And the space you held for me in such with grace and love and kindness, because I couldn't see it. You and I and Debbie were in a cab in Philadelphia, and I was in the back seat riffing, just going off, just really upset about someone else and how they were managing their journey, which was affecting my journey, and how wrong they were, and how right, obviously, I am. Now I can crack up about it. I had no idea what I was spewing out, and no idea the energy I was putting out, and no idea the lens I was looking at it with. And with that grace and elegance that you carry, you just looked at me with love, and you were like, don't worry about her. Don't worry about it. Let that go. That has no effect on you, and you just be you. Do you remember that moment in time?
Yeah, I do. And it's so interesting for me to hear you reflect back on that moment. And like, I do remember it because I remember what was going through my mind. I think at that point, we hadn't spent a ton of time together. Like, we ran into each other, we worked on things together, but we hadn't really spent a lot of time. And I remember watching you over those few days. We were working on a project, all three of us together, and talking and meeting. And like you do when you're out of town, you get into a lot of different conversations. And I remember very specifically listening to you talk in that moment. And I had seen so much in you in the days prior. Like, I thought, wow, does she have so much to give the community? And I have to be honest with you, I was thinking of it more through a community lens than even a Kristen lens. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, when you reflect back on what I said, I hear how you took it. And I was thinking in that moment, I don't want her to blow this up, what she has to put back into the community. Like, I really saw you kind of at the edge of something that could go either way. And I was just compelled to say to you, like, don't let that get in your way. And it was less of a personal prompt, but I love that you felt it as a personal prompt, because my motivation was more like, no. Keep coming to the table. I remember, like, whatever was going on was keeping you from coming to the table fully. And I think I said, like, look, just keep coming back to the table. Don't let this throw you off. And so I was talking to you in a real, like, kind of professional lane. And it's so funny, over the last, year, I know you have had to mirror that back to me, because I'm good about coming at the table for the community's sake, but like, not letting things get blocked or personal for me in my personal space is harder. And so it's just so funny how that message you've had to like re-deliver to me but in a completely different space. And that's what I kind of like about that story.
Well, and that's what I love about our friendship. And I think too that, I respect personal and professional boundaries, of course, but not showing up as whole self and not being comfortable as whole self. And that was the pivot for me to start digesting and contemplating, what does that mean to be my whole self and be comfortable with my whole self, irrespective of how somebody else's journey is going, and showing up to the table full with no expectation from the table, just offering and absorbing and contemplating. That was such a pivotal shift for me personally and professionally. And it wasn't an overnight, now I can do it great, but I caught myself all the time. And now that has been, to your point, for the past year, something I'm connecting with lots of people about. It's know who you are, be comfortable in that skin, heal, love, and then show up irrespective of outcome.
Yes. So that's where you took it to the next level, because if I'm completely authentic with you, the way I was intending it, and I know that I was intending it this way because that was the space I was in at the time, I was kind of given the advice, like, just fake it. Right. And luckily you didn't take it that way. Right. Because I was just, honestly, I was like, look, just keep showing up at the table. Don't let anybody see that they're getting to you. You know what I mean? It was from a purely kind of inauthentic place. Like, just don't let them see you sweat kind of advice, like that. Oh, how often do women get that advice? Right. Like, just show up in a certain way, like be a certain way so people will accept you. And I so desperately wanted you to keep coming back to the table for the community that I was willing to give you that advice. But thank goodness you misinterpreted it properly, right? I wish I could take any kind of credit, but the advice wasn't pure, right? But you took it and said, you began a journey of really knowing yourself so that you would keep showing back up to the table, but in your most authentic self and being comfortable with that. And then when I saw you starting to do that, I was like, wow, what a much better way to show up at the table. Like, be yourself, but first you have to really figure out who that is, right? So that you get out of that space of showing up just as everybody expects you to, right? Like this expectation of how you're supposed to behave or how you're supposed to be. I can't think of in the last 6 months how many times people have either told me, you need to be tougher, you need to be nicer, you like everything I need to be in order to make something happen. And there's such a push for that the journey that you're taking people on breaks them free of that, right? That come as your authentic self, appropriately, of course, but in your own appropriateness, not in the appropriateness of other people.
And when you're comfortable with self, which it's new for me, and I'm getting better on my journey. Again, it's not about vomiting it or flaunting it or in your facing it. I'm actually calmer and quieter than I've ever been, because I do show up wholly and fully and I'm very curious about the situation. But what bubbled up for me just now, and you've helped me so much with this part as well. And again, this isn't like a daily conversation I get to have with you or even a weekly touch-in I get to have with you. But going from someone who's had a very robust circle, like lots and lots of people, the more the merrier. Everybody knows that. I'll invite one person and then they think they're the only one, and then they show up and there's 100 people and they're like, oh, I didn't realize you're inviting everyone else. I love people and I still love people. But the chapter for me was of this excavation and deep dive down to find self was I was a solo practitioner. And it was a sad and lonely experience. And I just was very detached from pretty much anybody. And it was in that loneliness and that solace that I was able to rediscover, or actually, I like the word better, discover, because it's not a because I actually never really knew. And you were one of those key pivotal people that at times I would connect with authentically, and it was not pretty. And you held space for me, and I want to honor you for that and thank you for that. But what I want to touch on and hear from you about is the loneliness that there can be in being a different type of thinker. I found out last year that I am so innovative in my thought and so disruptive in the way I view things. I didn't know that because it's how I see things, that very few other people are on that same plane. And so in my awakening and not being distracted, I was very lonely because I couldn't find people that I could connect with because I thought so different. At times has that experience, first of all, so thank you for being there for me, but then how, you're such an innovative disruptor, how do you manage that?
Well, I think we've touched on this once in a while, not this directly, but I think one thing for me is everything you said about wanting to be around people. I'm exactly the opposite, right? Like I am in roles in my life where it is really necessary for me to be an extrovert, right? I need to be engaged. I love connecting, right? Like connectivity is important to me, but not in the same way that it showed up for you. So I was more of a solo practitioner, right? So I had experienced a loneliness that was different than the one you were experiencing, but it was loneliness all the same. And I think because you had watched me not be kind of engaged in a lot of that group dynamic, right? You just never saw me at any of that. Nobody sees me at that stuff. That's not where I show up. And sometimes I think that can be misunderstood, but it's because I had been such a solo person. And I think that contributed to you being able to kind of reach out to me because I wasn't surrounded by a lot of people, right? Like, so coming to see me or talk to me didn't mean you were talking to me and 25 other people. It meant like, let me tell you how I operate in this space. But again, in that kind of mirroring way, I was able to be authentic with you to say, yeah, I do feel that loneliness a lot, right? Now, my loneliness, I think, was more from the perspective of I wasn't maybe always being my authentic self, right? I was so guarded. I think my loneliness came more from guarding myself because I didn't want to make a wrong move or a wrong comment. You know, that the expectations were so different in different settings that it was almost safer for me to pull back. But I think that you do have to surround yourself with a few people, right? That I think you and I are exploring a course together where we were talking about having like supportive allies, wisdom givers, and then challengers. And I think that those three descriptions of who needs to be around you for your own personal accountability, your personal growth, your feeding of your soul, you need those people, but you don't need 50 of them, right? You need a few of them. And then just surround yourself with other people when you want to, because they bring you joy and you enjoy the connectivity and that kind of thing. So I think that I have probably spent more time with just a few people. But you are helping show me how to be a little more brave, you know, about reaching out. But I've been kind of guarded because I am trying to be more authentic now. So I want to be sure that when I'm approaching someone, I'm approaching them in my authentic self and not that kind of expectation or appropriate, you know, what needs to be appropriate self.
Yeah, that reminds me of my stepson, Brendan. And he was such a scrappy little athlete, you know, and didn't have height, you know, like his dad. And so was always proving his worth, right? Worked his butt off. And when he was going for it, and there was no one better, you know, and he won all these awards and this and that. Then kind of as he was finishing up his high school career, and the expectation was on him that you were going to get a full ride to Division I, you know, top performing baseball school. And that expectation was there. It started messing with his head.
Yeah.
The
expectation's tricky, isn't it?
Right. And
expectation is tricky.
Yeah. And then this is the even more interesting thing I think I've been contemplating this year. Is the expectation truly what is being put upon, or is it what I'm projecting on the situation? Because what I'm finding as I show up authentically is that people are like even more inspired and more attracted to walking beside and working together. And they're like, wow, I didn't know this about you. And I'm thinking, so speak to me a little bit about the pressures of, and the letting go of the expectation, because that's a tricky one for lots of people.
Yeah. And I think for me, the expectation trap really falls more on my side, where I want it to be a certain way. And if I'm honest with myself, it has to do with control, right? And wanting to control a situation. I used to say all the time, like, I have a full-on movie running in my head at all times. And that helps me some in the visioning space, because I can kind of see it like in, listen, it's not just a movie, it's an IMAX cinema experience, right? Like, where the vehicle is, the chair's moving like the vehicle, and things are rushing at you. So that works great in certain spaces and can really be a blocker in others, because you've already got it all figured out. Like, I can write the story of you, of me, my kids, my marriage, my job, and I have the whole thing like completely visualized. But the problem there is, I'm not the director of everybody, right? Like, I want everybody to move stage right or move stage left. And then you get the scholarship to the Division I school, and then we all go and we see you play. It's so weird how I do that. And I've had to really separate that out to like casting a vision and then having the responsibility of opening up and listening. I guess it'd be like script rewrites, like letting other people help you write the script, not just writing the entire script for everybody. And so sometimes I suffer disappointment, not in that the result is disappointing, but because I've tried so hard to control it and I have such an expectation around how it should be, instead of letting it be. Like, let it be what it is, and take that ride instead. And so I actually did a visualization for myself where I burned the movie theater to the ground. Like, I burned it down, like, for myself to say, you're not going back in that movie theater again. There is no movie playing. You're living it, and that visualization of just letting it burn to the ground really helped me, because I can't even walk in there anymore.
That is such an awesome description of trying to control our environment. And I did the same thing. It's very safe when you know what the outcomes are going to be, right? And then when they're not, because of course you're not in that control, and that's not living, and there's no opportunity to grow if and then how painful, right? And how disappointing and all that. That's been a huge growth for me. I didn't burn mine down. But now what I do is I get the big old thing of popcorn. And I even use the popcorn emoji sometimes when I'm communicating with my trusted friends. And I sit there with my popcorn. I'm like, this is so interesting. And this is part of the course you and I are taking together. This is new for me as well, but I think really helpful in the letting go of control. The popcorn is enjoyed equally with the challengers. The same person that I complained to you in the cab about 2 years ago or whenever that was, I now can just observe and be in wonder of and experience, and including the angst. If there's angst, I experience it. I let it roll through my body. I feel it, and then I let it go. And part of my ill health had been all the work I was doing to deflect or stuff feeling what I didn't want to feel. Holy wow. And literally, making myself violently ill. So thank you for that movie theater. I like the idea of burning it down and actually living it. Like, that's a whole step without popcorn that maybe I'll step into. Divinely actually rolls into something I want to talk to you about, which isn't part of my journey reflection, but kind of the future. One of the many ways that you inspire and challenge me is through your incredibly unique lens of how you approach community. I in meetings sometimes that we're in, and I'm defaulting into, we'll fundraise for this in a budget. And you've been a great coach to me looping me back to a more holistic, impactful way to look at community. I'm not yet that maturated in my thoughts as to how can we approach problem solving or community building or connectivity, interconnectivity. And you're so damn good at that. So couple that with a global pandemic, because that's, I mean, in this case, the pandemic is a gift of pause and innovation and just complete disruption. So what are some of the lenses or thoughts that are bubbling up for you or manifesting because of the pandemic as to how you look at community interconnectivity?
Yeah, I love this point of discussion because I think that COVID and the pandemic is shining a light on things that were suffering and broken before, right? I like they are not broken and suffering because of the pandemic. And I've even changed my language about this because for 6 weeks or so, I kept kind of trying to position this as like the bright spot or what I'm getting out of the pandemic. And then I started really listening and hearing and reading from people who were saying to me, stop saying that, because for some people that is so offensive, right? Like people that have lost people, people that are now on the brink, and people who have been suffering pre-pandemic. For me now to just cavalierly say, oh, well, here's a bright like spot for me that it's been an enlightenment or whatever, like, no. So now I'm thinking more of it as like a flashlight shining on things that we all need to see that we have not seen before, particularly around equity. And the whole journey around community has been one of really understanding that community is everyone. And that sounds like a platitude, right? Community is everyone, but community is everyone and how we interact with each other. And, you know, over the last number of years, the whole concept of collaboratory, where I'm sitting right now, our space that we created, and I'm purposely not using the word place because we didn't create collaboratory, a laboratory without walls to be a physical space, although there is a physical space that's manifested, but it's really all about this space. And the space really is a space for everyone. But man, do we not have the system right in order for that to be actualized. So I often say every single night I go to bed, lay my head on the pillow, and understand when I wake up in the morning, the community is going to be different. And it's my responsibility to know how that is, right? So that takes a lot of listening and a lot of connecting. And I think through the pandemic, as we've watched issues around equity, economic disparity, how systems are broken, right? If systems were working, this would be really bad, really, really bad. But if systems were working, I don't think people would be suffering as much. So the new frontier really is with the help of people like Dan Pilata, our team here at the foundation, everyone in the community, is how do we think bold? How do we think a bold new vision? How do we dream big enough to organize up to it rather than keeping these marginalized aspirations, right? That we know we're going to hit. Like you said, oh yeah, I'll fundraise for that and it'll get done. But what if we like elevated that to something beyond, like that it feels so impossible that we cannot understand that we can do it? And it's all kind of tied to like the Apollo space journey when JFK declared in a time certain way that we'd get a man to the moon and back. Look, in the 60s, that was impossible. You know, now we look back on it, and if you really break down how it was done, that's the attitude that we have to come with now to really, really solve for these big issues. But it's going to take a major culture shift. And I believe that COVID can be our stepping off point to that we say never again will we see people in our world suffer the way they're suffering now.
And I thank you for those reflections. Two things for me bubbled up. I too had interesting reactions to the beginning of this. I was very aware that I still have a job. My husband still has a job. We still have a, unscathed, though not. So then here's me, everyone be light and love, and it's like, hi, how about you get me a job? So trying to be sensitive to that, but be authentic and true to my experience. And then dealing the past couple of weeks, survivor's guilt has been a thread, because how do we talk about economic disparities, or, how do we approach that and not be hypocritical? It's a very interesting balance. So I appreciate, those reflections for that reason, because it's been my experience too. So the flashlight on the already brokenness is a really beautiful articulation that, if you don't mind, I'm going to start using, and I will credit you, because I think that's fantastic. The second reaction I have to that, which I really want to put out there to you, so many people, and at times you and I are also those people, can't see the forest from amongst the trees. It's too overwhelming, right? And I've recently learned that audacious goal, like putting out that, seemingly impossible, because to your point, JFK was like, in 9 years, we're going to put a man on the moon. And at that time, that was insane. There's no way. And here, 9 years later, here we go. So I appreciate that. And I want to support and be a part of that audaciousness, because in all of the systems that I'm plugged into, they're all interconnected. And if you solve for this, it doesn't mean that that's solved for. And we have to take a holistic approach. And that's what I'm vibing from you, is this authentic, holistic approach.
Yeah, so the whole thing with Apollo is it would have never happened without NASA. Now, a lot of times when we start talking about NASA, right? When I start talking, again, based on a lot of Dan Pilata's work, when I start talking about NASA, people immediately think that I'm advocating for like a national place where all community issues are solved, like at the national level. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like each community needs a NASA, right? A coordinating entity. And JFK didn't just say we're going to get a man to the moon. He said we're going to get a man to the moon and back, right? That's a totally different thing. Like getting them up there, shooting them up there, right? One thing, getting them back safely. And I think he said safely, not just get them back, but get them back safely is a whole different mindset. So none of that would have happened without NASA. And NASA had to play a huge role in keeping everybody coordinated, inspired, everything. Right now, what we have in our communities is a flat organizational chart. And that occurs a lot. We talk about collaboration a lot. Listen, I work for a funder, right? A grant maker. There was nobody that talks more about collaboration than funders, because we all say we want it, but we have to put the infrastructure in to actually support it. And the way we've been doing collaboration isn't NASA level, right? It's getting together once a month for breakfast and talking about something. And then we all go back to the rest of our lives and the rest of our work. There isn't capital for it. The dream isn't big enough. There's not enough bandwidth. So what the foundation's really taking a look at and working on and moving toward is this idea of how do we play a NASA type role in our community in order to get moonshot projects done? How does that look? And one of the big blockers is the minute I even say this, like when I say this out loud right now, there are 5 people listening thinking, well, who does she think she is, right? Because the minute you try to step in and claim some kind of leadership, like, can you imagine if NASA said, well, listen, we don't want to make the people at this engineering company upset. We don't want people to really think that we're trying to take this whole thing over. No, we have to step into that leadership and say, we're going to take that mantle and we're going to run with it. And an agreement by other people, right? That this doesn't have to be a grassroots approach. Somebody has to play that NASA role. And so that's what we're really exploring right now. And also changing the culture of the way people think about supporting that financially.
It's just so, I'm freezing right now and chills, and it's so inspiring. And I think the style of leadership, right? It's not, I'm taking over and now I'm a dictator. It's that servant leadership. It's that here's the vision. Would you like to come aboard? let's all move here. And Sean Harvey, who's a very important person who hopefully I'll have the chance to connect with in this capacity soon. I participate with something that he hosts every week. And this week he shared, and this just blew my mind, truly what soulful facilitation is, which is what you're describing. Soulful facilitation is consciously and kindly facilitating. And it's not showing up with the answers. It's showing up with the right questions. I'm like, Sean,
yeah,
oh my God, because the answer has to come from every person that's coming to the table. It's not Sarah, it's not Kristen, it's not Dan. It's, okay, what are we trying to solve for? And that has been the biggest challenge for me in my work for health and well-being through the lens of healthcare, because it's like you study the part, you break it down and you study the particular. Okay, so what's wrong with my heart, or what's wrong with my hip? And it's not taking a holistic approach to solve the problem. So I love your lens that you're offering, and I encourage you to go ahead and offer that, because again, lots of folks, at least that's what I'm finding on my journey as I'm being authentic and showing up as self. And it's like, thank you. May I walk with you? I'm like, please, let's do, what are we trying to solve for? So I really encourage you to keep doing that, because there's lots of us who want to plug in, and we need that servant leadership. And you are the perfect person to provide that.
Well, it's also the belief that it can happen. Like I've been watching, we're currently in a time where Elon Musk's SpaceX, launch and, got recently scrubbed and everything. And, it'll hopefully get going here again soon. But, when Elon Musk says, hey, we're going to colonize Mars, right? We all believe it. Like, we're like, yeah, he's going to do it. But man, let a nonprofit say, I'm going to end hunger in our community, and you'll get the most giant eye roll you've ever gotten, right? Because people believe Elon Musk, right, will put all the resources, all the infrastructure, all the necessary things. He'll have all the capital he needs to get it done. That same thing has to be applied to our biggest social problems, right? We have to declare, just like he declares, I'm going to colonize Mars, we have to declare in our community, we're going to end homelessness in the next 9 years, right? Or, make the declaration, have it time certain, and then create a NASA entity that's going to keep it moving. Listen, if you watch any of the documentaries on the Apollo space program, there was infighting and everything. They were at war with each other sometimes, but they knew they had to get a man to the moon and back. And they knew that was their ultimate mission. And that's what kept everybody on track. And that was the role that NASA played.
And I think part of this dialogue and this reflection for me, it's easy, to, let's all come together and ask the right questions. And, it's all a lot, blah, 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 and great until you hit a bump in the road, right? And there's no way. You and I were at an event together where Elon's mother spoke. And I was like, they lived in I don't even know if they had 1-bedroom apartment, right? I mean, they were in this tiny little apartment as a family. I heard my husband, the Tesla owner that he is, and the Elon fan, and I've watched the SpaceX, I've watched it come back down and land on a platform in the middle of the ocean with the waves going like this. And I'm like, oh my God. It wasn't just like Elon said, we're going to do this, and all of a sudden it was here. That man has had to overcome, and there's a lot of people who didn't believe he could do what he's been doing. So, you're inspiring me with the Apollo story, with the Elon story. And I think as this takes on its own form, to cite how now it doesn't seem crazy. Remember, the world used to be flat. And the first people who were like, hey, I think it's round, they were insane. So, being alive when your thoughts are different, and that's that innovation that you bring to your community, to the globe. And it inspires me because I think outside, and at times I'm not understood. I don't even understand myself sometimes. And that's the satiation and joy and courage that you provide so that we can create sizable, sustainable change.
Yeah. And to bring this full circle way back to the beginning of our conversation, I mean, in order to do that kind of work, you have to be willing to be lonely sometimes. You have to come at it authentically. You have to keep coming back to the table, not just for the good of the community, but you have to keep coming back for the good of your authentic self, and have your expectations be open and flexible enough to adapt. So that kind of brings the whole conversation full circle to our talk in the cab.
Can't make this stuff up. Sarah, thank you for encouraging me and supporting me to stay at the table. My history, especially as a former flight attendant, is when I get uncomfortable, I go, right? I escape. And whether that's just literally in my own body, in my own head, or physically, go hop on a plane. And you have been a huge part of my growth process to stay at the table authentically in wonder. I still have my popcorn. And I thank you for being at the table and guiding the table. And I just can't imagine life without you. And I'm so thankful to call you colleague, mentor, and friend.
Thanks, friend. I can't believe our time is already up. I just want to keep talking, but we'll do it offline.
We'll do rounds.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Bye,
Thanks,
honey.
friend. Bye.